Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast. It's myself and Jason Noble and Jason Whitehead over in the US talking today. And we're very excited today with our guest, Dave Jackson, who's going to talk us through the idea of product-led, product-enabled customer success. Dave, if you don't know him, he's a very well-known figure over here in Europe and globally in the customer success field. I'll let Dave introduce himself. But he's absolutely one of the thought leaders in customer success, is looked up to, well respected by everybody in the industry, is well known on the speaker circuit, the talking circuit, for getting out there, talking about what customer success is, the difference it's made, and in the future direction it's going to go in. And today we're going to talk to Dave a bit more detail about the idea of product-led customer success. But first of all, I'd let Dave, could you do a little intro into a bit more background about yourself and where the idea came from?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for the intro. As it is said, flattery will get you everywhere, even if it's not always true. A little bit about me. My background is in consulting, particularly around customer focus. It's a field I've been in for a long time, about 30 years. I started a SaaS company in August 2000, probably one of the UK's first true SaaS companies. It was a customer feedback surveys product called Clicktools. We were, one of the UK's first. We were Europe's first, we were Salesforce's first European software partner. And as CEO, I led the company organically and then sold it twice. I sold 49.9% to SurveyMonkey in 2010 and sold 100% as part of a back-to-back deal to Calidus Cloud in 2014. And ever since then, I've been doing a bit of interim work as a global CS leader and advisory and consultancy work. So I work with exclusively B2B SaaS companies and the investment community. So I'm doing some work at the moment with a French VC, a UK-based private equity company, and a couple of B2B SaaS companies.
Did you see, before we get into kind of the product-led side of it, when you started up your business back in the 2000s, did you see customer success starting then? Did you see a need for it back in those early days?
I think, as I mentioned, Jason, I've always been involved in and a great believer in customer success, whatever it's been called. So I can remember the days when people used to talk about total quality management, about service excellence, about customer experience and customer success. And whilst they are different to a degree, at their heart, they're all the same thing. They're all about how do you build an organization to, and the phrase I've used and always used is, how do you build an organization where everything you do is about profitably winning, satisfying, retaining, and growing your chosen customers better than the competition. And that's a definition, as I say, I've used for many years. So whilst there are different nuances and whilst the audience is a little bit different, I think there's a lot that's talked about, well, is this customer success? Is this customer experience? Is this something else? Quite frankly, I don't think the customer gives a damn. And I think we get too obsessed with some of those conversations, saying, no, CX is part of CS or CS is part of... It doesn't matter. Just, go out there and do what's right for your customers. Don't worry about what you call it. Call it Fred if you want. Yeah, just do it.
Absolutely. I think it's something that Jason and I have talked about on a number of our podcasts. It is the kind of term for a customer doesn't matter. They're not bothered. They're really not bothered. They want to see that value. They want to see them grow. They want to see them get the value that they want from you and the outcomes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not new. I mean, Peter Drucker back in the 50s said the purpose of a company is to win and keep a customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can't remember who the marketing guru said, people don't buy a 1/4-inch drill. They buy, they need to solve a 1/4-inch hole. Yeah. So outcomes focus and customer focus is not new. It just has different labels and different connotations and different nuances.
Yeah. So with that, I think that's so true and a good reminder for all of us. So let's jump in though. And what is product-led customer success and why is it so important? To me, I think there's still a lot of people who are trying to figure out what exactly is this. What does it mean?
And I don't think there's a single strict definition of what it is, other than it is about building the success process into the product. And to me, this goes back to a number of fairly fundamental things. So I started as I say, a SaaS company back in 2000. We appointed our first CSM in 2005, a few months after Salesforce did, when David Dempsey, I think it was called the Dr. Doom, gave his presentation at the Salesforce leadership meeting, which said, we're killing this company because churn's 8% a month. I say we were a very early partner. We were Salesforce's first European software partner. We were a customer, we were a supplier. So we knew them quite well. And at the time, they were about the only company you could go and learn what running a SaaS company was about. So we picked up from that quite quickly. And I think what product-led means is it's a recognition about why do you build a SaaS product in the first place? Well, you build a SaaS product, you build a SaaS company because as a founder, you've recognized the pain point. You've recognized the pain point and you think you've got a way of solving that, which is as good as or better than what anybody else does. So you start a SaaS company. So it starts with understanding what the customer's pain is. And I think that quite often gets lost. You start there, but then you start to grow your organization. So you grow your marketing and sales capability. And then you think about, well, what am I going to do after I've won these customers? So you start to build a CS capability. You start to build a support capability. And I think you lose sight of what that initial pain point was and the purpose behind what the company is in the first place. So to me, it's about going back to basics and saying, no, actually, you know, we started this company, we built a product to solve a pain point. Well, let's put as much as possible in the product to do that. And there are a number of, for me, fairly influential things. One of them was a conversation I had with a guy called Dave Goldberg, who at the time was the chief exec of SurveyMonkey when they were talking about an acquisition with us. So you know, we'd explained our business position and our business case and our financial model. And we built a fairly rich planning tool to help us do that. And so we were able to say to Dave and to the SurveyMonkey team, look, you know, here's our revenues and you can see what we've done in the past. You can see what our assumptions are. You know, you can make an estimate as to our execution ability. So I think you should pay us this much money. Of course, it was a bit more than he wanted to pay. That's often the conversation. And I remember this conversation very vividly. They said to me, yes, Dave, I agree with that. But, you know, you've got this much revenue, let's call it X. But 15% of X are services. 15% of X are things that you do to help customers achieve the value in your product. And I don't want to pay the same amount of money for that bit as I do for the product bit, because it's not as profitable, it doesn't scale. Oh, and by the way, in supporting that product piece, you've got these two lines in your P&L. One's called support and one's called success. They said, I think they're both necessary, but I think they're bigger than they should be. And if you look at what SurveyMonkey had done, which is different to what we've done, which is what different to probably still 90% of the companies today, is we'd address customer success by throwing people at it. They hadn't. What they did, and I learned more about this as we worked with them over time, is they put a huge amount of time and effort into understanding what the customer was trying to achieve and how could they do that as much as possible in the product itself. So you end up with a company which has got a much higher share of revenues being product. In their case, it was 100%. And their gross margin is significantly higher. I mean, back in the day, I don't know now, but when we were dealing with SurveyMonkey, their net margin at the time was about 75%, which is what most SaaS companies' gross margins are, 75 to 85%. So it's
those
just
conversations
massively
that you had
profitable.
With Dave, so did they give you any insights into how they were doing that, getting the feedback and making the investment back into product? So instead of putting it on the team, what were the differences they were doing?
It was something that I guess I knew in a way, Jason, but I didn't know how to convert it in the way that they just sought to understand their customers as much as possible. and they put a lot more time and effort into building and testing their product for ease of use. I mean, they were obsessed with it, and still are, and quite rightly so. Whereas, you know, I think we took a much more traditional approach to product, is let's build it as richly as we can based on feedback from customers, but let's get it out to the marketplace and test it. And yeah, and then we use these other mechanisms, support and success, to effectively fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's, you know, the other thing that was quite instrumental was quite early on, I read the work of and was follower of Chen Zhou, who was the founder of Zuora. Wrote the book called Subscribe, which anybody in SaaS and customer success should read. It's a great book where he talks about the growth of the subscription economy and what this means for companies. And he's got a great line in there, which I've used and repeated many, many times, which says, we tend to meet each new challenge by creating a new department.
Yeah, very, very true. You know, I'm wondering too, as you're talking, how they sought to really understand their customer and their pain points and where they were. It almost sounds like they were going for advanced customer understanding as opposed to how do we find our ideal customer profile? How do we find someone who's going to fit what we want to do?
I think it's both, Jason. So, you know, one of the conclusions that I've drawn, and one of the things I talk to my customers about, is I think there is a competitive advantage to be had by understanding your understanding your customer better than your competition does. I think we, you know, one of the reasons that we perhaps don't do as well as people like, and SurveyMonkey aren't the only people doing this now. There's, you know, with the growth of things like freemium, it's much more commonplace. I think the depth of understanding of customers, I don't think we put half as much time and effort into that as we should do. I was talking to one of my co-founders over coffee this morning, and we were talking about, well, you know, if we were to start again, which we might do, what would we do differently? And I think what we would do differently is we would spend excessively more time in understanding customers than we did in the past, and we would invest excessively more in product than we did in the past. So if you look at, you know, the whole product-led growth environment, look at the research that people like OpenView do. People like the leaders in that space, people like Atlassian and Trello and Slack, have a look at how their P&Ls are structured. So if you look at the traditional model, and, you know, Salesforce is a massively successful company, huge respect for them. They spend about 60% of their sales, of their total revenue on sales and marketing, and about 15 to 20% on R&D, and 8%, 12% on G&A, and, you know, into profit. If you look at people like Slack and Atlassian, they're typically spending 40 to 50% of revenue on R&D. It's a completely differently structured P&L. And what they're doing is they're taking that deep understanding of customers and they're building it into product. Now, that gives you an acquisition model, which is, you know, what Freeman and Rich free trials are about. And it gives you an ability to actually deliver value to customers by relying more and more on product than you do on people. Now, you know, let's head off this conversation about I'm against people and CSMs. No, I'm not. But I do think we spend a lot of money on people and put them to do what effectively is repetitive and boring work. And I don't think that's good for them, because I don't think it's engaging, and I don't think it's the right way to do it for customers. So I think we also underestimate how much customers actually value self-service.
Can you give a couple of examples of what you think are some of the repetitive, boring work that could be embraced into a product, and what sort of things actually should CSMs do because it's best done by people?
So I think basic things like teaching a customer how to use a product, teaching them how to do some very basic fundamental process change and process design. I think that sort of work lends itself very easy to being productized. And I think because it is repetitive, I think, you know, after a few times, it gets less and less engaging. What I think will happen in the future, and I talk about productizing and product-led customer success as being a bit like chopping the top off an iceberg. when you do that, because of the physics, the next part of the iceberg appears.
Right.
There's always 9/10 below the water. So so a whole new set of issues and problems arise. So I think what people are very good at doing is finding solutions to those novel and new problems, which, by the way, as we learn more and more about them, we might find ways to productize it. So I think CSMs are best, our people are best focused on tackling new and novel problems. And the other thing is, I think, rather than being process teachers and product teachers, I think CSMs will become, and it's a grand phrase, change counselors, tackling the human issues about motivation around change. Can you productize some of that? Well, I'm doing some research at the moment around, how the brain works and what lessons we can pick up from that. But that's it's a second order problem. I don't see that being something done in the near future.
I think that whole issue of the challenge around change management is something that Jason, you and I have spoke about it at length before, and where does it sit? And a lot of organizations miss the expertise to lead that change. And it does inevitably, in many cases, fall down to the customer success team to do, because you're taking your customers on that journey. But quite often one of the problems you've got is that people are not trained, or they're not experts in how to do that change consultancy. It's a completely separate discipline that you need to understand. And that in itself can be a problem. And I really like the idea that if we can productize and operationalize and standardize a lot more of what the CSMs are doing and make that fit within the product, it gives us a lot more scope and flexibility to focus on the actual pieces, this change that customers want.
I think there are probably some new 3 Ps in the future of CSM. One is process. I think we're going to have to get expert at developing process, specifically success plans and success planning. I think second P is product. I've argued that a customer success team increasingly should have a product manager. What's the success process? It's a service. And if you look at a lot of companies in the service business, they have product managers. So I think product. And I think the third is, I'm beginning to wonder whether, a customer success team should have either on their books or have access to a psychologist.
Very interesting.
Process, product, psychology. A new set of 3 Ps.
But it is, I like that third one as well, because there's a number of different stakeholders that you're dealing with at the customer. You've got your users, your decision makers, and then you've got your organizations. And they all work very differently, and there are different psychologies for each. And without understanding them, and again, if you're not an expert in it, it makes it a lot harder to do and a lot harder to achieve what your customers are looking to achieve.
Yeah. We've worked with a lot of both the internal teams of buyers of software as well as customer success teams, and as part of our training consulting, we go through a lot of individual and change and group dynamics and motivation and ability and all that great stuff. And it constantly amazes me how many of the folks there never have had any previous exposure to it. And these are people, 20 plus years of professional experience, but it's in a different area. And when you share some, even just the basic stuff, their eyes light up and they're like, oh, wow, this really gives us new possibilities we didn't even think about. So I think it's really, really impactful.
I think what's going to be required though, Jason, is to go beyond change management. And I think I'm getting more and more and more interested in psychology and things like motivation theory, gaming, contingency theory. If you read it's a very hard read, but if you read the book by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, it's called Thinking Fast and Slow, and it's all about biases and heuristics about how our mind actually works. And it's not new. Many years ago, I did some work with a large UK retailer as part of a team. I was a very small part of the team. And one of the speakers there was someone I stayed in touch with who's a professor of psychology at Warwick University. And Gordon, his name is Gordon Brown. He's done a lot of work on the psychology of buying, and starting to understand some of that about how our mind can actually fool us. What biases that are built into it that just natural parts of the way that these things work.
Right.
So I think understanding some of that and building it into our practice of driving success for the customer, and I think longer term, actually started to build products with those concepts in mind.
Well, what do you see as the biggest? Sorry, Jason. What do you see as the biggest challenges with getting this kind of way of working out there for customer success? How do we help organizations go down this route to understand that they need to make these bigger investments in product and to focus more on what these 3 Ps are around customer success?
Yeah.
Because I've seen it, and I know you've seen as well, Jason, and you have, Dave, that the number of organizations that still are investing in resources and people, and it's just trying to plug that gap. Well, what do you see as the biggest challenges?
Well, I think one is getting people to recognize. Well, so one is just getting people to understand the concept.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, I was a CEO, and you look at numbers. What I was interested in was what investments can we make that will be great for customers and improve our financial performance. And that "and" is a very, very important piece. Lots of people, again, something I learned early in my life is that a lot of people look for what they call "or" answers. Well, you can do this or that. You can have quality or low cost. And I think the people that really, really move things forward and make real change are the people that say, well, how can I do that and that?
Mm-hmm.
It's what I call "and" answers. Because that takes you it requires a different level of thinking. So I think getting rid of that and saying, no, how can we get a product which delivers the success and delivers profitability? So one of the things is I have a financial model that says, okay, let's have a look at what it costs in terms of people. And as we scale, how many more people am I going to have to add? Okay, if let's say I can take 20% of what CSMs are currently doing and productize it. What's the engineering cost to develop that? What's the difference? Mm-hmm. And the differences are not just in a cost perspective, but if you go back to that conversation I had with Dave Goldberg, they're in a revenue and revenue quality perspective. So if I've got more and more of my revenue coming in for product, I'm going to get a higher multiplier in the value of my business.
Yep.
So you can model those things.
I think though that does require a big shift in perspective from some leaders to recognize that there's both a need to deliver customer success full stop, and there's a lot of folks who still don't even see that, let alone I need to bump new feature development off of my roadmap for a short time to put some of this other functionality as a higher priority. So the challenges to see there, and how would you address that?
Well, I remember having a conversation when I was doing an interim role, and the chief execs, he gave me 2 questions. He said, one, Dave, I need you to think about how we're going to scale this business massively. Mm-hmm. And I'd already got this idea of product-led customer success. So I said, well, this is what you do. Mm-hmm. And the other question he asked me at a slightly different time was, I need you to think about what sort of additional resources, how many more CSMs we need next year. And I remember going back to him and said, actually, can I give you some CSMs back and I'll have 10 engineers instead? So what would happen is...
What was his response?
He didn't get it. and there is that challenge. I failed to make that case sufficiently strongly enough.
Right.
But so, I do think we've got to start looking at alternatives.
Yeah.
And Jason, you are quite right in saying there are still some people that don't get it.
Yep.
Right.
And I think it's a problem at the moment, and I think it's going to be a massive problem in the future. I sense there's a switch underway. There's a change underway in SaaS, and I think there's a new generation of SaaS. I don't know. I think there's a new focus in SaaS, which is making customer success more and more and more important.
Right.
The ones that I think are, the ones I'm looking at in terms of SaaS companies, people like Notion and others, where superhuman, where actually success is just, it's not about a team at all. It is about everything in that. It's about the value proposition. It's about the marketing message. It's about the sales process. It's about the success plans. It's about the product. It's everything. And it's fundamentally different. You know, success is selling. I love probably, you know, one of your competitors in inverted commas at podcasts is Bill Cushard's Helping Sells.
Yeah.
And you know, that very phrase.
He's a guest.
Yeah, great guy, Bill. And I think his introduction is something like, it basically is the message is that, you know, helping does sell. And I think if we get that and we build that into the fabric of our companies. So a lot of people talk about CS as a philosophy, but then just say, yeah, that's important. But we've got a CS team, they take care of that. No. You can't, those two things don't go together.
Right. So if there are companies out there that say, you know, we see the value in it, we don't fully know how to do it yet, but we're interested, we think we need to move in this direction, where should they go first? How does one get started with really embracing product-led customer success? And are you ready from it from the very beginning, or the prerequisites they have to get done first?
Well, I think the first thing to do with application is hire me.
It doesn't scale either.
The starting point, whether you are doing this through people or through product, is the same. The starting point is a deep understanding of your chosen customers. And there's two things in that. One is you understand who your customers are. And the second is you understand what makes them tick in better than themselves. And then that becomes the basis. And, there's a very simple, but there's an approach to doing which you say, okay, well, I'll translate that understanding into a success process. And to me, a success process has got 5 elements to it. It's got a discovery stage. That starts with what I've learned from my sales and marketing teams, but I need a bit more than that. So that's, again, about building a little bit more understanding of who the customer is, who are the key roles and stakeholders in there, what are their challenges, how are they measured, that sort of thing. You then use what should be your expertise to help them set, and is sometimes probably tell them what their goals are. And that is a case of, well, let's say, I don't know, I'm marketing software. Okay, at the moment I'm getting 10 leads a week. I'd like to get 1,000 leads a week. Don't be silly. If you're here and you've got this amount of, if they've got this degree of sophistication, a good goal for you is to go from 10 to 20 in the first step. 1,000, yeah, maybe, but it's going to take a few steps to get there. So the second piece is benchmark and goals. The third piece is, what does a success plan look like? What do you need to do in terms of configuring and using the product? But just as importantly, what do you need to do in terms of making change inside your organization? Because I'm old enough to know that very, very rarely does technology on its own solve problems. Technology plus organizational change solves problems, but rarely technology on its own. And if we are going to be truer to customer success being delivering value to customers, then we've got to say we need to take on some of these other challenges, help our customers. That's why I think the psychology piece becomes important. So that's part 3. Part 4 is, how can I help you and guide you through that plan? And that's where, content and advice and guidance, which is, what a lot of CS work is about, which I think can be embedded into product in parts. And then the 5th part is what I call a success dashboard. And there are 2 elements to the success dashboard. One is, if we set these benchmark and goals, where are we on that path? And the second is, if we set this success plan, where are we on that plan? And we're reporting that back. And there again, some people doing that in product now. So there are people doing parts of this. I've seen discovery done. I have seen advice and guidance done. I've seen success dashboard done. I've seen goals and benchmarks done. I don't think I've seen anybody yet that I could hand on heart say, that's what I recognize product-led customer success to be in its entirety. I'm not saying they don't exist. It's just that I've not found them yet. I'd love to find them.
I think having those built into your product as well are fundamental, aren't they? So that you can show your customers from day one, and they can see the progress they're making, and it shows also that you as a partner or vendor buy into the success of your customers.
Absolutely. And if you think about how we're going in terms of, I think the next wave, current wave, and certainly the next 5 to 10 years in terms of SaaS is, I think it's going to be shaped more and more by what people are learning around the freemium model. Thing about freemium is you have to deliver success before you get the sale.
Yep.
So success is the new selling.
Right.
Very interesting idea. Yeah.
So I think you're right, though. This is still in its CS is still in its infancy, and you've said that many, many times. And I think product-led CS is even more so. But I think you've made a pretty good case for, while it could be a great component and a scalable factor, how quickly do you think it will take off and really be embraced if it does become fully embraced?
I think we'll see some examples come out in the next, I think they're probably there, I just haven't found them yet. If anybody thinks they know them, please share them with me, I'd love to see them. I think by 2025, I think it'll become an accepted approach to building a SaaS company. Might take a bit longer. I think it was Bill Gates got a great line, said, we overestimate what technology can do in the next 2 years, but underestimate its capability over 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's very, very
I think it's another example of that. I think it will happen. A couple of years, no. 10 years, I think it'll be mainstream. Why? I think for 2 primary reasons. One is the economics about it. But the second is, and one I think which is severely misunderstood, is how much people do now and increasingly value self-service. Every example of self-service has been poo-pooed. I'm old enough to remember the introduction of ATMs. And the bankers, most of the people in banking said, people will not stand outside in the rain to get their money out when they can go inside and talk to a teller. Guess what? They were wrong. And I think people are wrong in terms of saying, well, you can't do this. People like talking to a person. Yes, they do. When they can choose the time and when they can choose whether they need it or not. I think the world is littered with examples where self-service has been underestimated. Barnes and Noble said, Amazon, oh, don't worry about that. People like coming into bookshops.
That ATM example has got to be one of the best examples I've seen of self-service, that people do poo-poo the idea.
Yeah.
But you look at that, because I've seen models of self-service go wrong and horribly wrong, and it puts people off. And there are even some big organizations that try and do it, and self-service is frustrating. But when it works, it's pivotal, and it's a massive change in the way you interact with a business.
Absolutely is. And I think, go back to something I talked about earlier. I think those that succeed will be those that say, how can we deliver a stupendously great customer experience through the product and profitable and scalable? It's back to the and piece. You can't say you can have one or the other. You have to find a way of doing both. And actually it starts with what we should be experts at anyway, understanding and delivering on our customers' needs.
Right. And, just a sort of a final thought around that too is, I've got a free checklist that I have on our website around how to identify if you've got competitive customer success services. And if you're a buyer of software, evaluating between alternative vendors, which one's ultimately going to make you more successful. I think you could make a case that including product-led customer success and having those capabilities embedded is another differentiator that does make you more competitive in the CS space, more likely in the future in particular.
So I think what will happen is this product piece will become the baseline. And I think, people that want to go over and above that or want someone to take the problem off their hands completely, there'll be opportunities there. And, that'll become one of the other things I've researched recently, which is, chargeable customer success.
I really love the idea of this becoming the new baseline for what customer success is all about. One final question, Dave. Really fantastic speaking to you, and thank you again for your time. But in the kind of future, when you see organizations doing product-led customer success, where do you think ownership of it sits in an organization? If that phrase makes sense, does it sit within customer success? Does it change the relationship between customer success and product?
That's a good question, Jason. And the hesitation in my voice is because it's framed in a way that suggests that what we've currently got is what we'll have in the future. And I don't know whether that's the case or not. Amazon there's a great book which is written based on work that Amazon did. It's called The Best Service is No Service. And Jeff Bezos' whole approach is customers don't want to call us up. They just want to be able to buy their products, have them delivered on time, and they're fine. And they want no hassle at all. The last thing we want to do is call the call center.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, and I think if you take that same thing to success and you take this concept of success being the bedrock of everything, does customer success disappear as a concept? No, it's amplified, it's expanded massively. Does what we currently think of as a customer success department look the same? Probably not. So one thing I've not cracked yet is what the organizational model might be for it. Mm-hmm. I did a piece a few years ago. It was called, it was the concept of an organizational model called a customer cluster. And the cluster was a combination built around groups of customers, probably built around use case and sophistication, but use case particularly, which combined sales, marketing, success, product management capabilities.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think there'll be a difference as you're looking forward as well of who owns it in existing organizations where they're trying to introduce it for the first time versus future startups 5-10 years down the road that may have it natively from the very beginning, from the very first founder. It'll be.
And again, this goes back to something we touched on earlier. There's lots of talk about who owns the customer, and it's just a silly question. Yeah, really. And I accept the thing that, well, if nobody owns the customer, the customer won't get looked after. I don't think that's the case in really, really customer-focused companies. And I think we get too hung up on our own labels and our own organization structure, and it's just customers don't care.
I think that goes back to the kind of the initial starting point about what do we call it, and you're so right. And I think the question's more framed around during this transition, what do we do about kind of the ownership of it? Because I think you're so right. We've got how businesses are now. We have customer success teams. In the future, if we look at what customer success will become in a customer success in a product-led way, it's very, very different. It's completely different individuals, different experiences. And it is what does that future organization look like is probably the right question. And it's great that we're not quite sure yet. But I love the idea of those kind of teams that work around the customers, that you've got the relevant people with the relevant bits of experience from the different functions in your business. It's almost to map your organization's structure to what you need to deliver for the customer.
All right. Well, I think it's been a really great conversation. Dave, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights, your expertise, and your vision for the future. I think it's really exciting stuff, and I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of things to think about it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dave.
To share my prejudices.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
for anyone who wants to learn more about Dave and his work and his insights, check out the description below. We'll have some links in there for you, and we're happy to share it. I'm happy to connect you with Dave. We really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.